Salute, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jim and welcome to Sounds German. And today I want to tell you about the so-called German youth protection system and how it works in relation to mostly music, giving you a bit of an insight in what could be considered a waste of time and effort of many people, and also some examples of what could be called flat-out censorship. Mind you, I will just talk about it on a somewhat surface level and give you a few examples, because talking about it in depth and everything it entails would be a whole lot more material to chew through, and this video is already long enough as is. Unlike movies or video games, music does not have to undergo a rating before being released. Some albums in Germany have that explicit lyrics sticker on the cover, but it has absolutely no meaning. Music albums, be it digitally or as a physical release, they just simply get released, while movies or video games have to go through a ratings process by the FSK or the USK respectively, so they can be shelved normally. But while music releases don't go through an age ratings process prior to release, they can get hit by something else afterwards. What I'm talking about is the so-called indexing, or what could also be applied is a nationwide confiscation, which is basically an escalation of the indexing. Being indexed is basically a very strict adults-only rating. An indexed album may not be made available to children. This means unless a store allows entrance only to adults, they have to take it off the shelves. For the same reason, indexed albums can't really be advertised anymore, because it must be ensured that only adults could see this advertisement. As an example, you could technically advertise indexed albums in a sex shop and just put them on the shelves there, because kids can't enter a sex shop. But a normal record store or the record department in an electronics store? Well, kids can come there freely, so indexed articles can't be shelved there anymore. However, indexing something does not equal a ban. Any store can still stock indexed articles under the counter and sell them to adults on request. One store chain in particular has become somewhat known for having a box with indexed movies, games and albums under the counter, letting you browse through it if you just ask for it. And if not, any store can legally order indexed albums if they are still distributed. As I said, it's really just a very strict adults-only rating. If an album gets indexed, it can be due to what could be called a minor reason or just a small factor of the whole album, like just a single track on the album or even just some artwork in the booklet, as it happened to Rammstein with their album Liebe ist für alle da. I actually made a video about that very album and its flash indexing. You can find a link to it in the description below if you haven't watched it yet. To roll with this example though, because there is one indexed song on the album, it means the whole album is indexed. What an artist can do, and what Rammstein did too, is to cut that one track away and re-release it. Any version that is identical to the indexed version is automatically indexed too. So if a CD gets indexed, so is for example the vinyl release. Or to use an example from the movie section, if, for example, Evil Dead is indexed in its US uncensored version, any other uncensored version would be indexed automatically too, no matter where it's from, because its content is identical to the version that was indexed. Items can get indexed due to a number of reasons, but the bottom line is always that the so-called Bundesprüfstelle für jugendgefährdende Medien, the BPJM, which translates to the National Inspection Authority for Youth Endangering Media, considers the item in question youth endangering. The reason this happens most often is excessive and glorification of violence, but other reasons can be, but are not limited to, extreme cases of discrimination, incitation to crime, or glorification of vigilantism. However, the BPJM won't act on its own. Someone, like for example a child welfare service office, has to request they check an item. This already led to things getting indexed long after their release, even up to years, because nobody demanded the BPJM checks it. Just to name an example here, the EP Fleisch Festival by German dark metal band Eisregen was released in 1999. It got indexed and later confiscated in 2011. Once the BPGM checks something, a 12-head committee comes together, checks the item in question, and then votes on it. If a two-third majority is reached, the item in question is being indexed. There are special cases where the constellation of the committee is a bit smaller, but that is the basic gist of it. The nationwide confiscation is a sort of escalation of an indexing and goes along with the sales ban in Germany. So all that under-the-counter selling I mentioned earlier is not possible anymore. Items get confiscated if a judge decides that the item in question is actually breaking the law. Again, the reason most often applied here, at least in regards to quote-unquote normal media, is excessive violence, according to paragraph 131 of the German law. This paragraph is about, and I quote, cruel or inhumane acts of violence against humans or human-like creatures in a way that expresses glorification or belittlement of these acts. Of course, the paragraph is a bit longer, but that is the important essence applied in these cases. However, possession of confiscated media is perfectly legal if you are an adult. I could, for example, just go into another country, buy all the confiscated, violent horror movies I can't buy in Germany, bring them back with me, and I would totally be fine. An exception to this, for obvious reasons, is child pornography. However, the relevant paragraph 184 comes so rarely into play I could only name one example from the top of my head. Oftentimes, a confiscation happens after something gets indexed on the so-called List B. List A is for all the normal indexings, List B is for items in which the BPJM sees heavy youth endangering potential and assumes it could possibly fulfill the requirements for a confiscation. These lists are publicly available, by the way. Anyone can check them, and new indexings and confiscations are announced publicly each month. The rights holder of an item that is being indexed can, by the way, object the indexing. In relation to music, most famously Rammstein did that with the aforementioned album Liebe ist für alle da. I also did a video about the Shindy song Stress ohne Grund, where the indexing got turned over. And in May of 2018, it was publicly announced that the album Sonny Black by German rap artist Bushido was taken off the index too. The judge stated that the BPJM didn't weigh freedom of art and youth protection enough in this case, so now the album is publicly available again. That said, in most cases an appeals process does not happen. It costs money, which not every rights holder has available, and can fail after all. Especially when it happens long after the initial release and the number of sales dwindled down, it's usually just not worth the hassle. That said, however, an indexing expires after 25 years. After this period of time, the BPJM checks an item once more and decides if it's still considered worthy of an indexing or if it should get taken off the list. Many, if not most, normal albums that are being indexed are from the rap genre, more specifically German gangster rap. When German gangster rap began to become big in Germany in the early 2000s, it was considered incredibly scandalous. And still to this day, the lyrics of these artists are oftentimes filled with blatant descriptions of violence, substance abuse, sexism, and glorification of crime. Artists like Frauenarzt aka King Orgasmus I, Kollega or the Agro Berlin crew have multiple entries on the index list. But it's not all bitches and bling. The self-titled album by German punk band Die Ärzte was indexed in 1986 because of a track that was about having sex with one's sister. The debut of the German rock band Böse Onkels, which was called Der nette Mann, was the first album ever being confiscated, which was decided in December of 1986, with the indexing being renewed as recently as 2011. Multiple tracks were deciding factors here, like calling for hooligan violence during football games, including hints towards the attack of the Third Reich on France during World War II. And the eponymous track Der nette Mann, which translates to The Nice Man, is about an inconspicuous man living in the neighborhood who also happens to be a child rapist and murderer. All these things led to a glorification of violence and child abuse, at least according to the judge who decided over the confiscation of this album. US metal band Anthrax also had their debut album indexed. The sole reason for this one? The cover artwork. Something that looks laughably tame and almost amateurish by today's standards. And while we talk about indexing for artwork, I absolutely cannot leave Cannibal Corpse unmentioned. I don't think there is a single band that had as many alternative versions of their artwork and booklets released over here like them. And if you take a look at some, if not all of their covers, like for example the album Buttshot at Birth, well, you can easily see how self-proclaimed protectors of the youth might just lose their shit. The strange thing is, however, that allegedly Cannibal Corpse also had to remove the lyrics from their booklets for releases in Germany. That would imply that the songs, or rather the lyrics, are considered problematic here too. However, to my knowledge, the albums themselves were never censored. All they had to do to make a re-release possible was change the artwork and remove the lyrics from the booklets. Sadly, the band didn't get around to comment on an email I sent them, but if I should ever get clarification on what exactly was the case here, I'll do an update video. A first-hand report would be very interesting here, and I understand they are on tour right now too, so I certainly don't hold it against them to not have the time to answer. I also wrote the BPJM on this matter, but also didn't get any response from them. The last category of music that gets indexed on the regular is, as one might expect, Nazi music. It should be obvious why here in Germany the state is very keen on keeping this stuff out of store shelves. However, the regular indexing of albums of this category is actually, well, it's completely useless in my opinion. You can usually find some sort of Nazi music getting indexed every month, and I mean that pretty literally. Bands like Lanza, the Zillertaler Türkenjäger, and alike are regular guests on the indexing list. And I know I had this little disclaimer in the beginning of the video, but once again I feel I have to point out I'm only name dropping these bands for a documentary purpose. I'm sure looking up just the covers for this section put me on some kind of government watch list. Anyways, as I said before, you will see Nazi music getting indexed on the regular. But it really doesn't matter, because guess what? No normal store in Germany sells this music anyways. For very obvious reasons, no normal store would ever shelve a single disc of these bands. And the stores that do sell them, well, chances are they don't give a fuck about the index as is. Either they are located in another country, so the index doesn't apply to them, or they are underground stores that operate outside the law. Still, each month the BPJM puts in time and effort to comb through these discs and decide they shouldn't be sold in public, even though they never were in the first place, which, all things considered, is a little bit bizarre. As a closing point, I have to say that I'm not a fan of neither the index nor the nationwide confiscation system. And I don't mean only for music, but for every art form, be it movies or games. It feels archaic at best and totally random at worst. Neither the ratings boards nor the BPJM have any strict guidelines after which they operate, so it really all depends on how the committee that was picked that day feels that day. If they have a bad day, well, you're shit out of luck, no matter if you deserve it or not. Looking at the decisions they made in the past, you can also clearly see they simply don't care for genre conventions or typical images. It is expected of a gangster rapper to talk about drugs and crime. It's expected that certain kinds of metal come along with gory artwork. Especially with how the internet developed in the past few years, it has become more obsolete than ever before, too. On the one hand, the index is considered a financial death sentence for an item that lands on it, at least here in Germany, of course. On the other hand, it doesn't stop people from consuming said media. I know this because I played indexed games when I was still underage myself. Last but not least, due to the fact that the BPJM only starts working on request, it is even more inconsequential than it is already by nature. If nobody, for example, ever complained about those Cannibal Corpse artworks, nobody would have said a single word to this day. Last but not least, and I admit this is only my personal opinion getting injected here, I also think to a certain degree it's up to the parents to control what their children consume. The system we have in place now really only makes it harder and more costly for adults to get the things they want. For an example, back in the day I had to import the original Evil Dead movie from Austria because it was simply unavailable here in Germany. Sometimes I still have to buy certain video games from vendors from other countries for that very same reason. If this system would really protect the youth effectively, I would probably be more open to the idea. But it simply doesn't. As it is right now, I can only see it as a waste of time, money, and manpower. And while it's technically not state mandated censorship, it's really as close as it gets. Because, sure, indexed items can be legally sold to adults, but they can't be properly advertised or just put in store shelves so people who just browse can't discover them on their own, and so on. And there are many stores that simply don't even sell indexed items because they believe it equals a ban. That is why it's considered a financial death sentence over here. Sadly, though, I don't see them abolishing the system anytime soon. It's been around for decades now, and it's not really a priority to politicians, so Germans will most likely have to import certain movies, games, or albums in future too. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please leave a thumbs up on the video, and if you didn't like it, we have a button for that too. And if you want at least one weekly music review from an artist or band you probably never heard about before, just subscribe to the channel. You can also follow Sounds German on Facebook or Twitter. I do usually post daily new music videos from all kinds of artists on there, whatever I can find that day. I hope to see you again next time. Have a nice day. Salida!